All right, so Andrew, what's going on? For those of you who don't know, you are the mastermind, I assume the one-man band behind Arca, right? So you're a new paddle brand coming to the industry. Full disclosure, you reached out to me. You offered me a demo, a sample, which you mailed to me at no cost. And I've been paddling for a couple weeks. My biggest thing is, can you give me your elevator pitch? Who are you? What do you do in your real job? What took you down this path?
Yeah. So, like Alex said, my name's Andrew Hiltbrand. I'm based out of Asheville, North Carolina, pretty much the paddling mecca of the United States, aka Southeast. So I currently work at a brewery as their shipping and inventory coordinator. I've worked in the industry for probably close to like 8 years. So I worked at Big Adventures for a while, worked in the Nantahala Gorge for a while as a guide and as an instructor. So I've kind of been in the paddling realm for at least 13 years and just kind of keep on chugging along. How the whole like paddle idea came about is probably in 2019, I would say. Maybe I was riding out to the Russell Fork race with a buddy of mine, and we were just kind of joking about, about how it's hard to even get paddles and, people making them and then not really, executing. And I was like, you know what's the worst case scenario? Like if I try and do this, it's like, yes, I'll be out a significant amount of money, but if it really takes off, then, it's a win-win for everyone. And so here we are with the true final product of what we've created. When I say we, it's really just me, myself, and I, and my alternate personalities. So that's how I've been running the business. And so far, super excited to actually get one in your hands and get some valuable feedback and just kind of like start pushing the product out the door and getting eyes on it and just getting people to know like, hey, like we are new, we are small, but we are doing something extremely different than what's being offered in the market right now.
That's really where I was hoping that you would go. So you're doing a relatively different blade shape. You are also going out of the bat to a wing shape, which basically makes this probably the most annoying version of a paddle to manufacture that you could have gone for, except that you're not doing a bent shaft. So you're clearly just punishing yourself out the gate because you see something in that you wanted to chase. So what was your goal? What was your design philosophy going into this project?
So whenever I started to first kind of like get the concept of what I wanted to do in a like paddle as the first product, it's like, okay, look at what the current market trend is. It's, forward blade offset paddles. It's, a lot of powerful blade shapes and people using them for pretty much everyday kayaking, whether it be play boating, racing, creeking, big water, you name it. Like you see them everywhere. So I kind of took that market research, if you will, and just was like, okay, well, there are a lot of great options out there for forward blade paddles. How do I stand out? How am I different? So I'm using a red Kevlar and carbon fiber outer material, so that way it kind of pops and kind of takes a lot of like eyes onto it because it's really vibrant. It's really something different to see. And if you see a red paddle, you normally would assume that it's fiberglass, but with recent advancements in composites, it's kind of making it a lot easier to kind of get a lot of different colors available to make these paddles without compromising too much of the durability or longevity of them. So that's kind of where I started, was making that, wanted to do that forward blade offset performance river running. It's like, yes, it's not really meant for like everyday low water abuse, but it can take it. And it's also really great at big water to where, you get powerful strokes because it's that forward blade offset and how not overly huge the blade shape is. It's only 690 square centimeters of usable surface area. And so that's everything from where the bend starts and the entire blade. So it's not like including the actual like hosel, which connects the shaft to the blade. So it doesn't include that. It's usable surface area.
So it, like in layman's terms, that would be like the palm and fingers of your hand, but not the wrist.
Right, exactly. So it's like what's actually like being useful in your like forward stroke. So we didn't want to go like super big, like 740 centimeters, but we didn't want to go like small, like 640. So I wanted to make something that was just right in that middle range to give us the opportunity to either, go into a larger size later down the road if we wanted to, or, dial it back to maybe a smaller blade shape for, quicker paddle strokes, or, maybe somebody doesn't like the blade shape.
Interesting. Yeah. So just to clarify one other thing for people who are listening who've never worked in composites before, carbon doesn't accept dye. So the reason that you're talking about a Kevlar weave is because glass and Kevlar will accept a dye. You can pretty much make it anything under the rainbow, glow in the dark, whatever you want. But the reason that you're seeing a black cross-hatched, I mean, it's basically a checkerboard pattern,
Yep.
is because of that. So hit a bunch of things I wanted to kind of touch on. Yeah, like it's definitely a little smaller than those Lettmans you see out there that are absolute beasts. One of the things that I definitely noticed that you went for, which yeah, is sort of more of the American style, which favors durability versus sort of the slalom inspired European stuff, is a lot of the European blades will have what basically we know as an aluminum edge, or maybe it's a steel edge straight off a ski or a surfboard or a snowboard, right? You went with a Dynel edge. Can you explain a little bit why?
It's actually not Dynel. It's actually another layer of Kevlar. I didn't want to go the Dynel route because, I want the materials to wear away first. Dynel has a really strong, like, abrasive resistance, and a lot of different fabrics don't like to kind of mesh with it. I mean, you could put a lot of resin into it, but then you kind of add more weight onto the ends of the blade, or like into the end of the paddle. But I didn't want to go that route just because of, the cost of that material and incorporating it with the blade. And once the outer layer wears down, it'll delaminate because there's nothing to really attach to it. So we wanted to just kind of leave that Kevlar protective layer in there, so that way, like, once the top layer wears, it goes to the next layer, wears down, goes to the next layer, so on and so forth.
So to apply that to what people may have seen, case in point, this weekend, my buddy borrowed my trademark sticker nut paddle and delammed the surface carbon off of the Dynel. That happens
Right.
all the time, and I'm always kind of just patching them back in. So what you're saying is that by going with the Kevlar on the inside, so Kevlar from bulletproof jackets, stuff like that, not actually super well known for its structural strength, although it has plenty. It's really known for being just a workhorse of taking abrasion, extreme abrasion resistance. So what I hear you saying is that you're building something that is more cohesive as a unit, as opposed to something where on the working edge, which is where it's taking all the hits, it's going to be primed to disintegrate.
Right. So it's essentially like making use of the entire blade instead of just the outer layers. So that way it's like, if the top layer chips a little bit, well, it's not exposing the entire rest of the material. And, if you happen to hit that one stick or that perfect sharp rock, it's just not going to, like, split apart. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to kind of keep the Kevlar edging. It still adds that protective durability and wear and tear. And I've had my first sample / prototype that I've been using since November, and you notice some wear, but I'm going out 2 or 3 days a week, and that was all winter, and now it's summertime, and it's still like holding shape really well.
Yeah, I'm kind of harping on it because I noticed this immediately as well. I immediately knew that you were up to something. I just didn't know what it was. And that was one of the things I wanted to get out of this interview. I saw exactly that. To me, I can see how you're finishing the process. I thought you just hadn't gone deep enough in your finishing, and I was wearing away. And exactly, it hits that point and it stops. One of the things that Kevlar is really annoying about when you work with it is it's one of the toughest fabrics to cut. You have to get special shears or another tool. So what you're going to see when you're using this paddle, from personal experience and just knowledge of how composites work, is it gets fuzzy. Like it literally looks like a frayed sweater or something until it chips off the rest of the way. So it's been so low here, it's been brutal. And
Yeah.
I've just been punishing this paddle the way I punish all paddles. And yeah, it very quickly does actually break in. But one of the things I've noticed with people who are seeing me go through that break-in process is people are going like, oh man, what's up with that edge or whatever. But you definitely, like, you do actually get there, at least in my world, in a week or two. That could be a month or so for somebody.
Right, exactly. And it's what's really nice about using carbon Kevlar as the outer layer is that the Kevlar actually will hold the carbon fibers itself. And so that way it doesn't continuously chip away, and it does generate fuzz, like you said. So we want to make sure that we're trying to keep as much material on the outside as possible without compromising, the edge durability and, how much impact that actually takes. So it's kind of like a trade-off. And I even considered, I was like, should I do a full carbon layup? And, just from experience on other carbon blades, it's like once you get it chipping, it's just going to keep going until it finds like that perfect stop.
Right. One of the things I notice about a lot of the things that I hear from people who think they're speaking with authority about foam core paddles is what they're basically talking about is they're talking about the aspects of the one layup they know, right? That the layup of the most common brand out there, which is a full carbon layup, right? So when that starts chipping away, it's essentially a playing card floating, right? One of the reasons that when we were building carbon playboats at first, if you look at those old ones, they are all this same or similar layup, right? They're using Kevlar for their wear spots. They're using Kevlar carbon weaves, is because when you break them, when you hit a rock or something, that Kevlar is going to hold the whole thing together. Even if it's broke, it's actually cracked through, it's going to hold it all together. So you're not going to see these same catastrophic explosions. Is that what you were going for?
Yeah, so that was kind of the thing. It's like being, from the southeast. It's, we're running the green like any chance we get, before work, after work, sometimes during work. It's like how abusive it is on all of our equipment, whether it be our helmets, PFDs, boats, you name it. So we just wanted to make sure that we are like kind of catering towards our side of the market, along with kind of like the bigger like people who like, no rocks at all. So that was the main goal with like the product development side. Like last year was to actually see how fast does it wear down, how well does it take hits, and like how does it look after X amount of days on water and people borrowing it and people like really taking it out on our local attainment spot, like on the French Broad, and just really like taking a beating with it to see how well it does. And I've been really impressed with what I've come up with, and super stoked that it's come to fruition and not just an idea anymore from like 2 or 3 years ago.
I respect it. I really do. It's one next to a boat itself, got to be one of the most miserable pieces to actually make, because you're doing all of that work and then a whole different kind of assembly. So one of the things that you certainly notice in terms of how the paddle feels in the water is what the designer was going for in terms of its actual thickness and shape. And that's one of the things that people really love about foam cores, is that dipping into a bucket of wet cement feeling. And that's one of the things I really go for when I choose a paddle shape. How did that come to be for you? Because you're solidly in the middle.
Yeah, so funny enough, it's like when I made the first prototype, I actually 3D printed it with carbon and plastic just to mitigate costs, because that's kind of expensive. But I had it printed, and I went down to like the local takeout and just kind of like tried it around. Like I had it as like the same thickness of what I thought I was going to have the materials laid up with. And I was like, okay, well, I don't like certain things on it. So I like kind of went back to the drawing board and like added a little bit more length, kind of softened some corners and kind of like reduced the that spine on the back face and the power face. But really in the construction, it's like I I was kind of thinking about it and I didn't want to put a lot of materials into it at first and then it just be like really heavy, or didn't want to put enough where it's just like it feels like a regular like carbon fiber Kevlar paddle with no foam core except for like maybe in the middle. So it was like I didn't want to fully go hard in the paint, if you will, with a true like super thick foam core. I've always kind of enjoyed like that middle ground of it's not like true foam core, but it's not like regular fiberglass or carbon. So it's like right there in the middle, and just kind of wanted to like keep it on that lighter side and not like, if you ding, that foam core, those thicker foam core paddles, it's like you might enter in some like leaky spots or delaminate it. So it was just kind of like luck, honestly, of how it kind of like came together as it did to be like a true foam core without it being like overly like thick of material.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it's one of those things where I wonder going forward how you'll wind up changing that if you do an inline non-forward offset paddle. I would
Mhm.
imagine that that's, suddenly the flutter and all of those things would change. Getting into sort of the last major component of the paddle being the shaft itself. So when you buy a lot of these carbon paddles, right? Even a carbon foam core paddle, even some of the racing versions of those, you're still buying a fiberglass shaft, right? So at least your outside material is the exact same material as the blades themselves. Is your construction, full on carbon Kevlar the whole way through, or if there's something secret recipe, you don't have to answer that.
Yeah.
But how did that come together for you? Because there is a little bit more flex than some of your competition. It's
Mhm.
definitely built in there, but when it comes to lightness and all those things, you can tell that again that was on your mind in terms of what materials you were using.
Right. So really the shaft itself is some carbon inner layers. I won't go too in depth with that, but it's, multi-layered carbon on the inside and then the same red Kevlar carbon fiber material on the outside to kind of like match the look of the blades. So that way it's like, you don't have these fancy looking blades with a generic looking shaft. So I wanted to make sure that look was across the entire board, and just wanted it to kind of like really, like I said, be an eye-catching piece on the river.
Gotcha. And then can you talk about your grip?
Yeah, so the way that I order like those shafts, they don't really come with indexing, and I've done some research to do like kind of like a pressed indexing mold, if you will. That was between, if my research was right, it's between like an extra $6,000 and $10,000 in just equipment. And so it's like, all right, well, how do we make something that feels really good in your hands, but not like, it's just terrible. So I found this grip that is, used in different industries, and I've got like a piece that I like use epoxy to kind of like hold it in place to make sure like, it's well protected, like if the grip wears out or if it's damaged and it just somehow happens to come off, then the index piece itself is also covered in epoxy resin. That way it's also protected if that happens. The grip does come standard, so it has to be on just for aesthetic. And it's actually kind of like I was really nervous about it at first because I was afraid of it being super slippery or too grippy, but I've heard a lot of great things from other boaters saying how, like, if they're upside down, they can really tell which side is which and where, their hands are and how the blade is actually, or how the paddle is like facing on doing rolls or just figuring out where their blade placement is. But that's just kind of like it's like a silicone grip that's used in the outdoor industry. So I just happened to stumble upon that too, and it's been working out really well. And on my sample paddle, it's still holding up, like it's almost brand new, and it's got like almost 8 months of use on it for 3 days a week, and that's pretty excessive. So I was worried about it just like wearing through in some spots because we don't really like to change our holes in our paddles, but it's been doing really well.
It's good to know that it's epoxied on. So if someone didn't want that, they would have to custom order from the hop. But moreover, like, it really does feel good and it works extremely well. It is really important when you're using a forward index paddle to know exactly where it is. So I definitely think everything you did for that was super smart. I would definitely recommend that you keep going with that one. I was very worried. But it's definitely working. Is there anything I missed that you would want me to know about your paddle or anyone else out there?
We kind of like touched on like the blade construction of it, but I will say that it's 5 layers of material. So I mean, there's like the PMI foam core center, Kevlar, 2 layers of carbon, and then the carbon Kevlar outside. So it's pretty well stacked with materials. If you were thinking it's just foam core and then like Kevlar and the outer layer, it's like no, there's definitely like some sandwich material in there. It's for just like added protection, stiffness, and just to kind of keep the whole shape together. Other than that, like I think we kind of like nailed everything that I wanted to talk about or touch on, and sold out of the first batch just about, and now it's on to the second one, and hopefully like things keep progressing that way and start expanding.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's definitely a solid product thus far. I'm gonna keep absolutely abusing it. My MO is to paddle something for a month before I even start the editing process to put a review out, especially if I'm going to do it properly. So yeah, a couple weeks left for me of thrashing on it, but so far so good for sure. I will say Hannah has paddled it as well. So being a smaller paddler, someone who does not use forward index paddles, she broke off her own paddle, had to paddle out with mine or yours. And didn't complain about it, actually stole it for the next lap. So that said something to me. Very, very hard thing to do. And we'll see how it goes, man. But good work. Definitely good work.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And it's, all these like people that are talking about it, it's awesome to hear other people's feedback, and they've only used it for swapping it for a lap with their buddy, or like actually like demoing it with me on most of the releases down here or anything. And it's like, man, like starting from ground zero to now, I was like, man, I don't know if it's really worth it. Like, man, I'm like really getting it in, and like, but yeah, I'm just super stoked that that's something different on the market, and locally built. So it just feels good.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it must feel really good, especially when you're out the money, to see some of it trickle back in. Must be
Yeah. I don't even want to talk about that, dude.
Understandable. Well, I think that's gonna wrap it up for us. But yeah, we'll be watching, man. Good luck. Good work.
Yeah, thanks. Let's definitely catch a lap sometime. I should be up there this fall for sure.
Dick.